are traceable to the use of firearms by armed police patrol teams. Military personnel were also found to be responsible for 3 of the cases resulting in the death of 3 persons when they intervened to restore calm to chaotic crowds. Investigation further established that 4 of the cases, which resulted in 5 deaths, were recorded when party enthusiastic supporters resorted to the use of firearms against their opponent. The 2 other cases involve persons who were lynched during confrontation between supporters of the 2 major parties. It is worth noting that 21 suspects have been identified through witness interview, scene visit, reconstruction of crime and crime scene, and forensic and ballistic examination of material of evidence relevant to the cases. 11 new dockets have been built on the cases. 4 of the identified suspects have been arrested and admitted to police inquiry bills to facilitate further investigation and to trace their accomplices. 5 other identified suspects have been remanded in prison custody. Warrants of arrest have been procured to facilitate the arrest of some of the identified suspects who are on the run. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, the 2020 investigation reports are as follows.
President John Mahama directed the police hierarchy to ensure an immediate reopening of investigations into the unfortunate killings and violence that characterized both the 2020 and 2024 general elections. He also asked that a report be presented to him on the outcome of the investigations. A couple of weeks ago, the report of the investigations were presented to the President, after which he directed the Minister for the Interior to take steps to brief the nation on the outcome of the investigations and actions taken so far to bring the perpetrators of that violence to book and seek justice for those who were affected. So this afternoon, we deem it opportune for the
sacrifices, the hard work that you are putting to keep all of us safe. We forever remain grateful to all of you for the sacrifices. And to take this opportunity once again to thank him from the Minister of Interior and the media in particular for coming to grace this very important occasion. Let me start by saying that the investigation is ongoing. As many of us may know, it's taking some time, especially that of 2020. It needs some more detailed work to be able to get it done. But we deem it fit that periodically we update the nation as to where we are. So we've submitted the second report to His Excellency. The first one was in June, and we did the second one 2 weeks ago, and he advised that we update the country where we are. So you realize that most of it is not really conclusive, but it is ongoing. But at least you can see a lot of progress that have been made. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the team, a 30-member team from the CID department that has been working tirelessly to ensure that justice is served. So without further time, I'll just go ahead. So Government Communication Minister, the Deputy Minister for Interior, the Acting Chief Director, Minister of Interior, the Inspector General of Police, representatives, members of COMAC, directors from the Interior Ministry and the Information Service Department, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of us once again. It gives me a great sense of duty to present to you all the outcomes of the report on the 2020 and 2024 election violence which occurred across various centers in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, elections in Ghana in recent times have been characterized by violence in various forms. In 2020 and 2024 across the country, and well over 40 individuals got injured. The report outlined detailed account of all the 12 cases recorded during the period. The detailed report, which has been submitted to His Excellency the President also contains the various incidents, how they were brought or got to the notice of the police, and actions taken by investigators in line with the laid down investigation protocol and procedure. The report further detailed action taken when the Special Investigative Task Force took over the cases at level initially investigators had reached, and detailed findings derived from further interviews, interrogations, field visit, reconstruction of crime and crime scene, and forensic analysis of various materials of evidence retrieved during the investigation. Every violent incident recorded during the general election presents various criminal offenses which will have been committed by different persons involved. The report took into account a number of incidents where some procedural actions were overlooked. There were instances of clear breaches of discipline, violation of legal requirement, and total neglect by officers who were either present or responsible for situations that required prompt, responsive actions. The focus is to avoid veering into areas that might confuse procedural breaches with the main mandate, which is to investigate, identify, and prosecute persons responsible for death during the two general elections in the years of the 2020 and 2024. There were also instances of persons being rushed to the court on frivolous and vexatious charges when the same incident had resulted in the death of person or two. Great effort was expended to distill these charges and identify persons against whom evidence could be produced for the deaths recorded during these elections, with evidence to sustain criminal charges being preferred against them. Through careful review of police dockets, on-site inspections, and stakeholders interview, the Special Investigative Task Force identified 12 specific cases. I must be quick to add that I have since directed that the report of the Commission on the Election Violence at Ayawaso, West Wigram, be traceable to the use of firearms by armed police patrol teams. Military personnel were also found to be responsible for 3 of the cases resulting in the death of 3 persons when they intervened to restore calm to chaotic crowds. Investigation further established that 4 of the cases, which resulted in 5 deaths, were recorded when party enthusiastic supporters resorted to the use of firearms against their opponent. The 2 other cases involved persons who were lynched during confrontation between supporters of the 2 major parties. It is worth noting that 21 suspects have been identified through witness interview, scene visit, reconstruction of crime and crime scene, and forensic and ballistic examination of material of evidence relevant to the cases. 11 new dockets have been built on the cases. 4 of the identified suspects have been arrested and admitted to police inquiry bills to facilitate further investigation and to trace their accomplices. 5 other identified suspects have been remanded in prison custody. Warrants of arrest have been procured to facilitate the arrest of some of the identified suspects who are on the run. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, the 2020 investigation reports are as follows. At the collation center, fired indiscriminately, and in some cases, they directed fire at the escaping crowd. Spent shells could not be retrieved from the scene. As in the case of the Teshima, immediately the day after the election, it rained heavily, and so they couldn't pick much from the scene. And no bullets or projectiles were retrieved from the bodies of the deceased to assist ballistic examination to identify which weapon caused the injuries or death. It made it difficult to bring finality as to who actually caused the injury and death for now. However, investigation will continue until justice is done. The recommendation from the task force was that the crowd control response of security personnel by resorting to the firing of live arms and also directing fire at the escaping crowd is not acceptable. The victims of the gunshots have suffered injuries that cause them pain, loss of resources, for treatment as well as income. Families have also lost breadwinners. The state should take steps the state should take up the responsibility to compensate the families who lost their breadwinners, as well as those who suffered injuries. Police should receive orientation and desist from using lethal force in crowd control situations. Appropriate crowd control gear should be provided to security services. Party executives, officials, and persons involved in election management should be well educated on the provision of the Anti-Vigilante Act 2019 Act 999. Action taken so far on the Tachima. The report has been forwarded to the Attorney General for the compensation to be given to the families of the deceased and the injured. Docket of the case is also referred to the cold case unit of the CID police, meaning that the investigation will continue further until we are able to find the actual perpetrators. In the Greater Accra region, the observation of the task force, special task force, is that investigations into the incident failed to identify the person who shot and killed the deceased Richard Otu and Emmanuel Dompre. However, 3 identified persons by police as those who fired shot into the crowd and injuring them were charged with the offenses of conspiracy to commit murder, contrary to the Section 23(1) and 47 of the Criminal Offences Act 1960, Act 29, and attempted murder, contrary to Section 48 of the same Act. They have been committed and are standing trial at the High Court, Criminal Court 1, Accra. The recommendation of the task force is that the task force recommend monetary compensation to the families of the deceased. The injured must abide by the judgment of the court in the trial, after which compensation, if any, may be determined. So the actions that we've taken so far on this is that same report has been forwarded to the Attorney General for the workout of compensation to the deceased family. The docket is also at the cold case unit to seize if death resulting from high-handedness of state security are to be avoided. Police and sister security agencies should design, ahead of election, a well-coordinated plan on election security management. There should be controlled use of military. There should be controlled use of live ammunition from lethal weapons as a means of scaring or driving crowd from particular location. Capacity building is recommended for police and all arm-bearing security agencies whenever required for election security or crowd control duties. Compensation should be paid to the injured and to the family of the late Ibrahim Abbas. The action that we have taken since the report came is we forwarded that to the Attorney General for compensation of both the deceased family and those who got injured. The docket is also forwarded to the cold case unit of the CID, since that soldier or the one in the uniform has still not been identified. The Banda Ahinkro, that's in the Bunu region. Taking into consideration the advice from the Attorney General's office, the task force recommend the following. The investigation continues even though the township are not willing to give information out because of the rivalry between the two towns of Banda Ahinkro and Banda Bonkazi, but the docket should be forwarded to the cold case unit. The monetary compensation should be paid to the family of the late Silas Wolonkami. Report forwarded to the AG for compensation to the deceased family. Doma West Constituency, that's in Krankwanta. This was also violence resulting from the 2020 voter registration mop-up exercise. The task force recommends that the supporters of both NDC and MPP who converged at the voter registration center near the district assembly premises on August 8, 2020 were engaged in riot. They were, however, not attacking the police or security personnel at the center. The use of live ammunition to disperse the riotous crowd by the police was inappropriate and does not conform to any laid-down crowd control method. No police officer or security detail at the registration center was under attack for his or her life to be in immediate danger. The task force therefore recommend that the family of the deceased, Kofi Robert alias Kofi Labet, be compensated. Victims Ilyasu Gabriel and Kwame Gatan should also be compensated based on the extent of injury suffered as a result of what appears on their medical report form. Savulugu constituency in the Savulugu northern region. The observation of the task force is that there was no confrontation between MPP and NDC supporters before the shot was fired into the crowd. However, NDC supporters were jubilating and firing gunshots and throwing firecrackers. Again, it was established without doubt that the bullet that killed the deceased, Samira Zakaria, was a shot from a high-velocity rifle. The same bullet also caused injuries to other 3 persons. There are 2 possibilities. The first is that the shot must have been fired into the crowd by one of the persons who were jubilating deliberately or accidentally. And the second alternative is that someone with the intention to kill or injure the jubilants infiltrated into the jubilation crowd and fired the fatal shot. The task force recommend that the family of the deceased be compensated for their loss. The 3 other injured persons should also be compensated based on their medical report and for pain and loss suffered as a result of the injuries. And here again, because as they couldn't establish exactly who fired the shot, the docket is also returned to the cold case unit of the Ghana Police Service for further or for future investigation or further investigation. So 2024 election violent cases, starting with Ewutu Senya East Constituency, that's Kaswa. The task force observed that the Honorable other state authorities and traditional leaders should sensitize the members of the 2 communities of Tolom and Yampala on the dangers associated with the kind of weapons being held by individuals and the right channel to follow when offended by others. Since the investigation did not produce any evidence against the 6 persons arrested by police during the stop and search exercise conducted immediately after the incident, they should be discharged while efforts are directed at arresting those who actually engaged in the firing. The regional police commander should engage the district officer, the PID director, and officers in the region to assist in the arrest of the suspect, Alhaji Yakubu Abdulateef Kopshi, and his gang in order to hasten prosecution. The report has been forwarded to the AG for the compensation to the deceased family and the injured. Damango constituency at Damango. The observation of the task force is that supporters were unruly, riotous, and caused damage to they were hit by the bullet. In a screening exercise, 11 soldiers were identified as those detailed at the constituency center in Mankraso on the December 7, 2024. 8 of the soldiers interviewed admitted firing warning shots alongside the police to disperse the mob, which was attacking the collation center. They denied firing into the crowd and further said that they were not aware that anybody was hit by a bullet during the process. There was no doubt that the late Dominic Nimo died from the shot fired by the soldiers. Similarly, the 4 victims also got their injuries through the same process. The recommendation of the Special Task Force is that the family of the late Dominic, as well as the 4 persons who sustained the gunshots injuries, should be compensated by the state. The report has since been forwarded to the Attorney General for advice and the compensations to the families of the deceased and the injured persons. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, it is worth noting that the report has been sent to the Office of the Attorney General for further actions and prosecutions. As Minister for Interior, I want to assure the public that government under the able leadership of His Excellency President John Mahama is committed to upholding the rule of law and to ensuring that all those responsible for the violence are held accountable. Government will continue to work with all stakeholders to strengthen democratic institutions and ensure that elections in the country are peaceful. God bless our homeland Ghana and make it great and strong. I want to thank you once again.
So open the for me to ask any questions that are deem necessary to elicit the appropriate responses. In the interest of time, we are only able to take 5 questions. So if you have a question, please put up your hand, walk out to the front here, identify yourself and go straight to the question. So the minister will conduct
the task force. We've seen that they've done a comprehensive job, they've engaged the people. In some cases, they are still meeting the people. In the reports, some identified that there were stray bullets there, and then we've seen the results of the stray bullets. Are there also going to be some form of forensic analysis of some of the bullets to really determine who it came from, where it came from, so that whoever this corpus, like you've indicated, that we are going to provide justice. We should be able to provide justice whether it came from the civilians or it came from a security personnel. Are there going to be forensic analysis to determine some of the bullets, where it came from, and who it killed, so that we can bring justice to them? Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Honorable Minister. My name is Bernard Kedazi from Oyemfa TV and Oyemfa FM. I wanted to find out what measures are being put in place to prevent election violence. Thank you.
Please, good afternoon, everyone, and then good afternoon, Minister. Please, I'd like to ask, I'm Tofik Abdurrahman from DN Media, and I'd like to ask, the previous government actually rejected key part of evidence that was gotten from the Ayawaso North Wogon by-election. So I would like to ask if you can actually assure Ghanaians what, if the government is willing to put steps together to make sure that these, if claims are being made, they are not actually rejected. And then I'd like to ask what steps the ministry is taking to make sure that incidents like this do not happen further in the future.
Well, let me.
Yeah, just to talk about what you just said about.
Fine. Where the commission itself said that further investigation should be done. So we are keeping our doors open because, like we said, until justice is done, we will not be able to bring this unfortunate incident to a stop. And to add it up to what we are doing to prevent these things from happening. You see that both in the short commission's report and even the task force report, because interestingly, it's very voluminous, but I'm happy that I was able to get time to read from the first page to the last page. Even though they have not finished, they have made a lot of recommendations. For example, why should security people who are going for election monitoring be in hooded masks? What are you hiding? Why should you mask your face? They made recommendation about coordination. So, for example, if you decide to bring immigration officers, fire service officers, the military and the police to embark on an election activity, the recommendation is that why not let them train together? Let them have a coordination. They will have a coordination among themselves. Don't give guidance to only the superior officers. Make sure that all those who are on the election activity are holding the guidance so they can communicate effectively. All these things are part of the recommendation that they have made. But because, like I said, the process is not comprehensive and is not completed, and we are already looking at it, and I can assure you, you can see that because they submitted their first report just around the time that we finished the Ablikuma by-election. When we were going to Abuja, we fully implemented some of the recommendations that the Special Task Force has made. So I can assure you, as the Minister for Interior, under the leadership of His Excellency John Mahama, we are not going to make this a kind of one-off thing, the usual thing, when something happens, then we will just talk about it, try and create some report, and then allow the report to be creating just, and then that marks the end of it. No. That will be done, because it's not just about identifying people and compensating them, but making sure that the perpetrators are brought to book, and that will be really, really our effort. So, yes, I can assure you that we will leave no stone unturned. We will make sure that we put in measures that will prevent these things from happening. But I want to say that as citizens, we ourselves need to also be helpful. Because you see, when we refuse to give them information, like we are having in Banda Ahinkro and Banda Bonkazi, because there is rivalry between the two towns. Meanwhile, somebody has lost his life. We need information. People cannot just come because they are CID, they can conjure facts or information. they need people to give them information that can lead them into finding the truth. So we want to encourage our communities to also be supportive of the exercise, so that by the grace of God we'll bring this to a finality. So I don't know if I'm